Hollywood and the mob, two empires built on power, money, and knowing where the bodies are buried. For decades, these worlds didn't just coexist, they collided in ways that ruined careers, destroyed lives, and according to some, even ended them. The entertainment industry was built on cash, and organized crime followed that money like sharks follow blood. From the nightclubs where stars performed to the studios that employed them, the Mafia's fingerprints were everywhere. Some celebrities made the fatal mistake of thinking they were untouchable. Others deliberately crossed dangerous men, believing fame would protect them. They were wrong. Today, we're exposing 15 stars who actually tangled with organized crime, some who survived to tell the tale, and others whose stories ended in tragedy, mystery, or whispered warnings that still echo through Hollywood today. This is the dark side of stardom. 1. Frank Sinatra. No celebrity's name is more synonymous with mob connections than Francis Albert Sinatra, but the chairman of the board's relationship with organized crime wasn't just friendly association. It was complicated, dangerous, and nearly destroyed him multiple times. Sinatra's connections began in the New Jersey clubs where he started singing, venues controlled by the Genovese crime family. As his star rose, so did his mob relationships. He befriended Sam Giancana, the Chicago boss, and performed at venues across the country owned by organized crime figures. FBI files on Sinatra run thousands of pages, documenting decades of surveillance and suspected connections. But Sinatra also clashed with these dangerous men. When he attempted to distance himself from certain figures or refused specific requests, the consequences were swift. There are documented incidents of Sinatra being physically threatened, including one alleged encounter where he was warned about his attitude in terms that left no room for misunderstanding. His friendship with the Kennedys created particular tension. Sinatra reportedly promised Giancana access to the White House, then couldn't deliver when the administration turned against organized crime. Giancana felt betrayed, and Sinatra found himself caught between two powerful forces. The singer survived, but the shadow of these associations followed him forever, costing him gaming licenses and tainting his legacy. Sinatra learned what many discovered too late. You don't simply walk away from the mob. 2. Marilyn Monroe. The blonde bombshell's connections to organized crime remain among Hollywood's most persistent and disturbing mysteries. Marilyn Monroe didn't just know mob figures. According to numerous accounts, she was intimately entangled with them in ways that may have contributed to her untimely death. Monroe's relationship with Sam Giancana allegedly went beyond casual acquaintance. She was reportedly involved with him during the same period she was seeing both John and Robert Kennedy, creating a dangerous triangle of power, politics, and organized crime. Giancana allegedly bugged Monroe's home and recorded conversations that would have been explosive if released. But Monroe also angered powerful figures. Her unpredictable behavior, substance abuse issues, and tendency to talk made her a liability. When she allegedly threatened to reveal secrets about her Kennedy affairs, she became dangerous to multiple powerful interests simultaneously. The circumstances of her death in August 1962 have fueled conspiracy theories for decades. While officially ruled a probable suicide, inconsistencies in the evidence have led many researchers to suspect foul play. Phone records disappeared. Her housekeeper's timeline shifted. The crime scene was allegedly cleaned before police arrived. Did Monroe's connections to organized crime contribute to her death? The full truth may never emerge. What's certain is that she moved in extraordinarily dangerous circles, knew secrets that powerful men wanted buried, and died under circumstances that remain suspicious 60 years later. Sometimes knowing too much is fatal. 3. George Raft. Unlike stars who accidentally stumbled into mob circles, George Raft grew up in them. The actor famous for playing gangsters on screen was genuinely connected to real ones off-screen, and those relationships would eventually destroy his career. Raft grew up in Hell's Kitchen alongside future crime figures, including Oni Madden, who would become one of Prohibition's most powerful bootleggers. These weren't just childhood acquaintances. Raft maintained these friendships throughout his Hollywood career, serving as a bridge between the entertainment industry and organized crime. His gangster portrayals were so authentic because he knew the real thing intimately. Raft reportedly helped Bugsy Siegel establish himself in Hollywood social circles, providing legitimacy to a man who would later build Las Vegas. But Raft's mob connections eventually caught up with him. He was denied entry to Britain due to his associations. He lost casino jobs in Las Vegas and Cuba when authorities documented his organized crime ties. The man who made millions playing gangsters found himself blacklisted because he actually knew them. In his later years, Raft was essentially broke, his fortune gone, his reputation permanently stained. He had believed his friendships were personal, separate from business. He learned that with the mob, nothing is ever separate. Every favor creates a debt, every friendship an obligation. Raft's career stands as a cautionary tale about the true cost of keeping dangerous company. 4. Dean Martin. The seemingly carefree crooner navigated mob waters more carefully than his Rat Pack partner, but Dean Martin's career was nonetheless built on stages owned by organized crime, and he knew exactly who signed his checks. Martin performed regularly at venues controlled by various crime families throughout his career. Unlike Sinatra, who seemed to crave mob friendships, Martin maintained professional distance while remaining respectful. He showed up, performed brilliantly, collected his money, and asked no questions. This approach likely saved him considerable trouble. However, Martin couldn't entirely avoid entanglements. His partnership in various Las Vegas ventures meant dealing with figures who had undeniable organized crime connections. When authorities investigated these relationships, Martin's name appeared repeatedly, though never with the same intensity as Sinatra's. There are stories of Martin deflecting mob requests with humor, using his famous charm to avoid commitments without giving offense. Where Sinatra might argue, Martin would pour another drink and change the subject. This diplomatic approach allowed him to maintain relationships without creating the enemies his partners seemed to collect. Martin died peacefully in 1995, his reputation largely intact despite decades of performing in mob-connected venues. His survival strategy was simple: be professional, be friendly, be forgettable. In a world where standing out could be dangerous, Dean Martin perfected the art of talented invisibility. 5. Sammy Davis Jr. The most talented member of the Rat Pack faced unique dangers as a black entertainer navigating both Hollywood racism and organized crime. Sammy Davis. Jr.'s encounters with the mob were complicated by the era's brutal racial dynamics, creating situations where he had virtually no protection. Davis performed in venues where he wasn't allowed to stay as a guest, spaces controlled by men who saw him as valuable property rather than a person. His relationship with organized crime was one of enforced servitude more than voluntary association. He had to accept the terms offered or lose access to the major venues entirely. The most chilling incident involved his relationship with Kim Novak. When Davis and the white actress became romantically involved, the studio allegedly contacted organized crime figures to end the relationship. Davis reportedly received direct threats against his life and the lives of family members. The message was clear: end it or die. Davis married a black dancer shortly after, a union many believed was arranged to defuse the situation. He rarely spoke about these threats publicly, but those close to him described lasting trauma from the experience. His story illuminates how organized crime enforced social boundaries as much as financial ones. Davis couldn't simply be careful or diplomatic. As a black star in a white-controlled industry backed by racist organized crime figures, he was vulnerable in ways his Rat Pack partners could never fully understand. 6. Jerry Lewis. The comic genius had terrifying encounters with organized crime that left him shaken for years. Jerry Lewis's mob problems stemmed from his early career performing in venues controlled by figures who didn't appreciate being told no. Lewis and Dean Martin built their act in nightclubs where organized crime called the shots. When the duo became phenomenally successful, they attracted attention from figures wanting pieces of their earnings. Lewis has described being summoned to meetings where his future was discussed by men he couldn't refuse. One particularly harrowing incident allegedly involved Lewis being dangled from a hotel window by his ankles, a message about respecting certain business arrangements. Whether this specific story is literally true or somewhat embellished, Lewis consistently described genuine fear during this period of his career. After splitting with Martin, Lewis faced pressure alone. His solo success made him valuable, and valuable people attracted interest from those skilled at extracting value. Lewis eventually navigated these relationships by finding powerful protectors, but he never forgot the vulnerability of those early years. In interviews late in life, Lewis spoke more openly about these experiences, describing an industry where talent meant nothing without the right relationships, and the wrong word to the wrong person could end everything. His comedy brought joy to millions, but behind the laughter lay memories of genuine terror at the hands of men who didn't find anything funny. 7. Lana Turner. The Sweater Girls mob connection ended in one of Hollywood's most sensational deaths, a killing that has never been fully explained. Lana Turner's relationship with Johnny Stompanato brought organized crime directly into her Beverly Hills bedroom, with fatal consequences. Stompanato was an enforcer and associate of Mickey Cohn, the Los Angeles crime boss. He pursued Turner relentlessly, and their relationship was volatile from the start. Stompanato was possessive, violent, and dangerous. He allegedly threatened Turner's life multiple times and terrorized her with his mob connections. On April 4th, 1958, their relationship ended in bloodshed. Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, stabbed Stompanato to death with a kitchen knife. The killing was ruled justifiable homicide, with Crane acting to protect her mother from a violent attack. But questions have persisted for decades. Some investigators believe Turner herself wielded the knife and her daughter took the blame to protect her career. Others suspected the scene was staged entirely. Mickey Cohn was furious, publicly releasing Turner's love letters to humiliate her and demanding justice for his fallen associate. Turner's career survived, but she lived the rest of her life shadowed by that night. Whether she killed Stompanato or her daughter did, the episode demonstrated how mob associations could turn deadly without warning. Turner had invited danger into her home, believing her fame offered protection. She discovered that protection has limits. 8. Tony Curtis. The handsome leading man grew up in poverty in the Bronx, where organized crime was simply part of the neighborhood landscape. Tony Curtis carried those street connections into Hollywood, where they created opportunities and dangers throughout his career. Curtis has described his early years in terms that make clear his familiarity with organized crime figures. The Bronx of his youth was territory controlled by various criminal enterprises, and surviving there meant understanding how that world operated. This education would prove useful and problematic in Hollywood. When Curtis arrived in Los Angeles, he found familiar faces from back east already established in the entertainment industry. These connections helped open doors, but also created expectations. Curtis reportedly navigated these relationships carefully, accepting help while trying to avoid obligations that could compromise him. His gambling became a particular vulnerability. Curtis loved cards and dice, and his losses sometimes put him in difficult positions with people who didn't accept excuses. There are accounts of Curtis performing specific favors to settle debts, though the details remain murky. Unlike some contemporaries, Curtis survived without major scandals connected to organized crime. His street smarts served him well, allowing him to maintain relationships without becoming trapped by them. He understood the rules because he'd learned them young. Respect the hierarchy, pay your debts, and never forget who your real friends are. 9. Telly Savalas. The man who would become television's most famous detective allegedly had real-world connections to exactly the kind of figures Kojak pursued on screen. Telly Savalas's background and associations have raised questions that were never fully answered during his lifetime. Savalas grew up in Garden City, New York, and served in the State Department before turning to acting. His path to stardom was unconventional, and along the way he developed relationships with figures connected to organized crime. His love of gambling brought him into regular contact with people who operated in legal gray zones. The actor was a notorious high roller in Las Vegas and Atlantic City, wagering huge sums at casinos with documented organized crime connections. Whether his relationships with certain figures went beyond fellow gamblers remains debated. Some accounts suggest Savalas served as a connector between entertainment industry figures and organized crime interests, facilitating introductions that benefited both parties. His portrayal of Kojak carried an authenticity that some attributed to genuine familiarity with criminal operations. The character's understanding of how the streets actually worked felt lived in rather than researched. Savalas never publicly addressed these rumors, maintaining his charming public persona until his death in 1994. Whatever the truth of his connections, he navigated these waters without visible consequences, suggesting either the rumors were exaggerated or he possessed exceptional skill at managing dangerous relationships. Perhaps both. 10. Harry Cohn. The tyrannical Columbia Pictures boss didn't just associate with organized crime. He allegedly operated like a crime boss himself. Harry Cohn's connections to the mob were structural, building his studio with money and methods borrowed from the underworld. Cohn reportedly received startup financing from organized crime figures, creating debts and obligations that shaped Columbia's operations for decades. His management style was famously brutal, with surveillance of employees, threats against those who crossed him, and a general atmosphere of fear that mirrors organized crime operations. The studio head maintained relationships with figures like Johnny Roselli, the mob's Hollywood representative, who had an office on the Columbia lot. These weren't casual acquaintances. Roselli allegedly helped Cohn manage problems that required methods unavailable through legitimate channels. When stars or directors became difficult, Cohn could allegedly call upon resources beyond normal studio pressure. There are accounts of recalcitrant talent receiving visits from men whose messages couldn't be misunderstood. Whether Cohn directly ordered such intimidation or simply benefited from the atmosphere his associations created, the result was the same: compliance through fear. Cohn's funeral in 1958 was surprisingly well attended for a man so universally despised. Red Skelton allegedly quipped that people came to make sure he was dead. But among the mourners were figures whose presence testified to relationships that went far beyond the movie business. Harry Cohn built an empire, and he built it with partners most moguls wouldn't acknowledge. 11th, Jean Harlow. The original blonde bombshell's stepfather was a mob associate, and her short life was marked by organized crime connections that may have contributed to the tragedies she endured. Jean Harlow didn't choose her mob associations. She was born into them. Harlow's mother married Marino Bello, an Italian immigrant with documented ties to organized crime figures. Bello used his stepdaughter's success shamelessly, extracting money and using her fame to enhance his own standing with criminal associates. The household was essentially funded by Harlow's labor, while Bello played big shot with dangerous men. Her second husband, Paul Byrne, died under mysterious circumstances shortly after their wedding, officially ruled a suicide. However, investigators and researchers have long suspected Byrne was murdered, possibly due to debts or conflicts with organized crime figures. The crime scene was allegedly altered before police arrived, and key evidence disappeared. Harlow herself died at 26 from kidney failure, though some have speculated her illness was worsened by poisoning. While this theory remains unproven, the number of deaths and tragedies surrounding Harlow does suggest something darker than mere bad luck. She never had the chance to escape her stepfather's world. Every dollar she earned passed through hands connected to criminal enterprises. Her beauty made her valuable, and valuable people attract dangerous attention. Jean Harlow's tragedy wasn't just dying young, it was never being allowed to belong to herself. 12. Joe E. Louis. This comedian learned firsthand what happens when you defy the mob, and he carried the scars for the rest of his life. Joey Louis made the nearly fatal mistake of changing employers without permission, and organized crime made him pay in blood. Lewis was performing at the Green Mill in Chicago, a club controlled by Machine Gun Jack McGurn, an Al Capone associate. When Lewis accepted a better offer at a rival club, McGurn warned him to reconsider. Lewis, believing his talent protected him, refused. On November 9, 1927, 3 men entered Lewis's hotel room, beat him savagely, and slashed his throat and face, leaving him for dead. The attack severed his vocal cords and left him with permanent facial disfigurement. Doctors doubted he would survive, let alone ever perform again. But Lewis did survive. He spent years relearning to speak, transforming himself from a singer into a comedian because his damaged voice couldn't sustain songs. His famous drinking became both coping mechanism and persona. Frank Sinatra later starred in a film based on Lewis's story, The Joker is Wild. Lewis eventually reconciled with Chicago's mob figures, reportedly receiving permission and even financial support to continue his career. He had learned his lesson in the most brutal way possible. In the world of organized crime, loyalty isn't requested, it's demanded, and the price of defiance is paid in flesh and blood. 13. Bugsy Siegel. Before there was a Las Vegas Strip, there was Bugsy Siegel, the handsome killer who dreamed of building an empire in the desert. Siegel didn't just connect with Hollywood, he embedded himself in it, using movie industry connections to build legitimacy for his criminal enterprises. Siegel arrived in Los Angeles in the late 1930s, tasked by the New York mob with overseeing West Coast operations. Unlike typical gangsters, Siegel craved social acceptance, and Hollywood stars were the ultimate status symbols. He cultivated friendships with actors including George Raft, Clark Gable, and Cary Grant, attending parties and premieres while running gambling, prostitution, and murder operations. His affair with actress Virginia Hill was genuine passion complicated by business. Hill allegedly served as a courier for mob funds, and their relationship mixed romance with criminal enterprise in ways that became impossible to separate. Siegel's vision for the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas was transformative, essentially creating the modern casino resort concept. But cost overruns and suspected skimming made his New York bosses suspicious. On June 20th, 1947, someone fired multiple rifle shots through the window of Virginia Hill's Beverly Hills home, killing Siegel instantly. His murder was never solved, though everyone understood why it happened. Siegel had dreamed too big and stolen too much. His Hollywood friends couldn't protect him from his real associates. In the end, Bugsy Siegel was just another body, proof that glamour offers no protection from bullets. Chussi, Johnny Roselli. He was called the mob's man in Hollywood, and Johnny Roselli's influence shaped the entertainment industry for decades. This elegant gangster didn't strong-arm studios from the outside. He operated from within, making organized crime and Hollywood practically indistinguishable. Roselli arrived in Los Angeles in the 1920s and quickly established himself as the connection point between organized crime and legitimate entertainment. He maintained offices at major studios, dressed impeccably, and socialized with the biggest stars. His charm made him welcome in circles that would have rejected obvious thugs. His power derived from the mob's control of theater projectionists' unions. At any moment, Roselli could shut down movie theaters nationwide, making his cooperation essential for studio operations. This leverage allowed him to extract payments, place associates in positions, and influence which films got made. Roselli allegedly helped fix the 1939 Academy Awards, ensuring particular outcomes for clients. He produced films himself, blurring the lines between criminal and legitimate businessmen. His relationships with stars gave organized crime access to glamour, while his criminal power gave those stars access to resources they couldn't obtain elsewhere. His end came violently in 1976, his body found in a steel drum floating in Miami's Dumfoundling Bay. He had testified before the church committee about CIA Mafia plots against Castro, making him a liability. Hollywood's elegant gangster died like so many others, betrayed by the world he had helped build. 15. Carl Laemmle, the founder of Universal Pictures, built his empire in an era when organized crime and legitimate business were nearly impossible to separate. Carl Laemmle's early battles against the Motion Picture Patents Company allegedly involved alliances with criminal figures who helped break the Edison monopoly. Laemmle operated his early film exchanges in Chicago, territory controlled by various criminal organizations. To distribute films independently required protection, and that protection came from men who expected compensation. Some historians argue the entire independent film movement that created Hollywood was partially enabled by organized crime's willingness to challenge established powers. Once established in Hollywood, Laemmle continued operating in an environment where criminal influence was pervasive. The studio system required relationships with theater operators, many of whom had organized crime connections. Union negotiations often involved figures whose authority derived from violence rather than votes. Laemmle himself was never directly implicated in criminal activity, but the ecosystem he operated within made such entanglements practically unavoidable. Building an entertainment empire in early 20th century America meant dealing with the forces that controlled urban commerce, and organized crime controlled substantial portions of that commerce. His legacy is Universal Pictures, one of the oldest and most successful studios in Hollywood. That legacy was built in partnership with forces the official histories prefer to overlook. Carl Laemmle made movies, he also made deals, and some of those deals involved men whose methods wouldn't survive scrutiny. From crooners dangled from windows to blonde bombshells caught in deadly triangles, these 15 stars discovered that fame offers no immunity from organized crime. The mob didn't care about box office receipts or Grammy Awards. They cared about money, loyalty, and respect, and those who failed to deliver paid prices no career comeback could repair. Hollywood has always sold fantasies, but behind those fantasies lurked a darkness that claimed careers and lives with equal indifference. The stars who survived learned to navigate these waters carefully. Those who didn't became cautionary tales whispered in dressing rooms and studio lots. The next time you watch a classic film, remember, the industry that made it was built on compromises with dangerous men. Some debts were paid in dollars, others in blood, and a few remain outstanding to this day. Subscribe for more dark Hollywood history.